They laughed at me for bringing a homemade cake to the family party. Cheap and desperate, his sister said loudly. Just like she always is. My husband took it back to the car without a word. I sat in silence for the rest of the night. But when they opened their mailbox, 2 weeks later, I didn't grow up with money. We didn't have matching plates or store-bought cakes. But my mom made sure every holiday and birthday felt like something. She taught me that the time you put into something matters more than the price tag. That's why I bake. It's the one thing I know how to do that makes people feel cared for. When I married Derek, I knew his family was different. Upper middle class, polite on the surface, but sharp underneath. The kind of people who notice if your shoes aren't name brand or if your car's more than 5 years old. I've been trying to fit in for 10 years now. They've never said it outright, but I'm not one of them. I came from Newark. I work part-time at a preschool. I make things from scratch because it's cheaper and it feels real. So when Valerie, Derek's older sister, invited us to her daughter's birthday, I offered to bring dessert. She said, "Sure if you want," with that tone. The kind where she doesn't say no, but you know she's already judging.
I didn't let it get to me.
I pour myself into that cake. Rich chocolate sponge, raspberry filling, ganache glaze. I even piped the little girl's name on top. I made edible flowers from sugar paste. It took me 2 days. I didn't cut corners. We got to her house, big and bright in a Westfield cul-de-sac, the kind of place with lawn service and matching porch furniture. I walked in holding the cake like it was something precious. Valerie met us in the kitchen. She looked at the cake, then at me. She raised an eyebrow and said, loud and clear, "Homemade?" "Of course it is." Then she looked around the room, smiled, and added, "God, you're so cheap and desperate. Just like always." I froze. I felt the blood drain from my face. I saw a couple of her friends laugh behind their wine glasses. One of them muttered something about quaint. Derek didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just took the cake out of my hands and mumbled, "I'll put this in the car." He didn't meet my eyes. I wanted to disappear. I sat in that living room with those people, smiling and sipping wine, and felt like I was made of glass. They talked about Europe trips and Pilates instructors. Valerie brought out a sheet cake from a high-end bakery and made a show of cutting it. Everyone gushed. No one asked about mine. No one even noticed it was gone. On the way home, I stared out the window and cried. Derek didn't say anything. Not "I'm sorry," not "she was out of line," not "the cake looked amazing." Just silence. The next day, I cleaned the kitchen. I put away the cake tools I'd left out, still covered in sugar dust. I threw out the piping bags. That's when something in me snapped. I didn't want an apology. I wanted them to feel small. Not just for the cake, but for every look, every joke, every time they made me feel like I didn't belong. So I planned something. 2 weeks later, they got an envelope in the mail. And it wasn't just Valerie who opened it. I didn't rush it. I knew that for it to work, it had to feel natural, not like revenge. Just something that slipped into their lives and made them question everything. I started by digging. I still had access to some of Derek's family group messages. Mostly boring stuff, photos of the kids, who's hosting Christmas. But I noticed something in one of Valerie's posts. A proud little update about her new side hustle. An interior design consulting gig she'd started with 2 other women. Working with elite clients in Summit and Short Hills, she wrote. I clicked on the link to her website.
Bada-bones.
Lots of buzzwords. But one thing stood out. All the images on her page looked too perfect. So, I reverse searched them. Every single one was pulled from Pinterest or other designers' Instagram pages. None were hers. No credit, no license. That's copyright infringement. She was running a fake portfolio and taking client money. I took screenshots. Every page, every image, every caption. Then I called in a favor. My cousin Aaron works in digital marketing. He's helped local businesses clean up their SEO and digital presence. I told him the truth, left out the petty parts, and asked how someone would go about reporting a site using stolen content. He gave me a list of the image owners and helped me file formal copyright violation claims. I didn't have to fake anything. Valerie had done the hard part herself. Next came the physical envelope. I printed out a full report, screen grabs of her website, links to the original sources, contact info for the photographers whose work she'd stolen. I didn't include a name, just a note. Your brand isn't as polished as you think. Might want to fix that before someone important sees. I mailed one to her house, another to her new business partner, whose address I found in a shared social media post, and a third to her husband's office. And then I waited. It took about 3 days. First, Derek got a call from his mom. She sounded tense. "Have you talked to your sister?" she asked. Derek said no. She hung up fast. That night, Valerie's Instagram page went private. Her business site went down. Within 48 hours, she posted some vague message about taking a break for mental health.
But I knew what it really meant: panic.
Embarrassment. Scrambling to clean up the mess. At dinner, I asked Derek, "Did something happen with your sister?" He just shrugged. "Some drama with her business. Not sure. She's not talking." I looked down at my plate and smiled. I thought that would be the end of it. But then I found out what Valerie did next. And that's when things got messy. I thought it was over. I thought I'd made my point quiet and clean. But Valerie wasn't the type to let anything go, especially if it bruised her pride. About a week after her business imploded, Derek came home acting strange.
Distant.
He barely looked at me, asked if everything was okay, and he just said he was tired. But he wasn't tired, he was cold. Polite in the way people are when they're angry, but pretending not to be. 3 days later, I found out why. He left his phone on the couch. While it buzzed with texts from Valerie, I saw just enough to know what was going on. She'd told him. She didn't have proof, but she knew. She recognized my handwriting on the note. "That cheap bakery bitch wife of yours is the only one bitter enough to do this," she wrote in one message. "She embarrassed me. You think I'm gonna let that slide?" Then came the worst part. "If you let her blow up my life, I'll blow up yours. You think Mom doesn't know about your consulting trips?" That was new. I'd never seen that before. I waited until he was asleep and went through his laptop. It didn't take long. There were emails, work travel that didn't line up, hotel receipts from cities he never told me he visited, and pictures. One of him in a bar with another woman, hand on her knee. Another of a hotel bill with 2 meals, 2 drinks, and a spa service. I felt sick. While I was worrying about baking a cake good enough for his family, he was out doing God knows what behind my back. The next morning, I asked him straight out, "Are you sleeping with someone else?" He didn't even flinch. Just said, "I don't want to talk about this right now." And that's when everything clicked. Valerie hadn't just insulted my cake. She hadn't just humiliated me at that party. She'd known about the cheating. Maybe for months. Maybe longer. That's why she felt so bold, so untouchable. That cake? That was just the match she needed to light everything up. And I had handed it to her. I had wanted revenge. And I'd gotten some. But now I had something much bigger to deal with. And if I was going to finish this, I had to stop thinking like someone who wanted justice, and start thinking like someone who had nothing left to lose. I didn't cry. Not when I confirmed the cheating, not when I realized Valerie knew before I did, not even when Derek stared me in the face and didn't deny it. I just went quiet. For 2 weeks, I kept to myself. I played the part, made dinner, did laundry, went to work, but inside I was planning the exit. I knew I only had one chance to make it right, and I wasn't going to waste it. First, I gathered everything. Screenshots of the messages between him and Valerie, the emails with hotel confirmations, the pictures. I found enough to show a pattern. At least 6 trips over 2 years that didn't match his work schedule. Then I went to a divorce lawyer. Quietly. I told her I wanted to file, but I didn't want him to know until it was too late for him to protect himself. She nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times before. We opened a new account in my name only. I moved half the money from our joint savings into it, legally allowed in my state since we were still married, and the funds weren't restricted. Then I stopped direct deposit to the joint account. Quietly transferred my paychecks elsewhere. He didn't notice. Then came the timing. Valerie's daughter was having another party, a big one, apparently just family this time. Derek said we were going like nothing was wrong. I nodded and smiled. The night before I left. Took my bags, my paperwork, my copies of everything. I went to a friend's house and sent out the emails. One went to Derek, with every piece of evidence, a scanned copy of the divorce filing, and a simple message. You don't have to talk now. I don't either. Another went to his parents. No details. Just a forward of the documents and a single line. You raised him. The third? That one was for Valerie. It had everything I knew. Not just the business fraud, which by now had cost her 2 clients and one of her partners, but something else I'd found. Her husband, Mark, had a real estate license. On a whim, I looked into it. Turns out, he had co-signed on a mortgage with a former client of Valerie's. Someone she swore she wasn't doing business with anymore. The emails suggested otherwise. I CC'd Mark. The fallout was fast. Derek tried to call me 12 times in one night. I didn't pick up. When I saw him next, it was in a courthouse. He looked smaller, tired, and angry in that quiet way that men get when they lose control. He offered a settlement. I declined. We dragged it out. I got the house. He moved back in with his parents, which, from what I heard, was tense. Valerie wasn't talking to anyone. Her business was finished, clients gone, name poisoned. Her husband filed for separation 6 weeks after my email. People say revenge doesn't heal anything. They say it leaves you hollow. But they're wrong. Sometimes it puts things back where they belong. It reminds the people who hurt you that you were paying attention, that you remembered, and that you don't need their approval anymore. Just enough silence to make your exit clean. I don't bake as much now, but I still have that glass cake dome. I keep it on the top shelf of my pantry as a reminder. Next time someone underestimates me, I'll bring more than a cake.